Get out of that house before sunset. The woman standing in my driveway pointed at my front door like she had just bought the place herself. Behind her, 2 HOA security guards stood with their arms crossed, watching me like I was some criminal who had been caught breaking into his own home. I looked at the red notice taped across my door. Final HOA violation, property must be vacated. Then I looked at her. Are you serious? She smiled. Very serious. You were warned. I was warned about what? Your house. I almost laughed. My house. She stepped closer and held up a thick folder. This neighborhood has standards. Your exterior paint, your driveway, your fence. Even the way you keep your front yard. None of it meets HOA rules. I stared at the folder. There was just one problem. I had never signed an HOA agreement. Not once. This house isn't in your HOA, I said quietly. Her smile disappeared for half a second. Then she looked at the guards. That's exactly what someone says when they know they're guilty. One of the guards stepped forward. Sir, you need to cooperate. I looked at his badge. Something about it felt wrong. Sure, I said. I'll cooperate. Right after you show me the document that gives you authority over my property. The guard froze. The woman suddenly became angry. You don't get to question me. I'm the HOA president. And I'm the homeowner. She pointed at my house. Not for much longer. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about paint, grass, or some stupid HOA rule. She wasn't trying to fine me. She was trying to take control of my home. And she had no idea who she had just picked a fight with. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Before you do anything else, I said, you should know one thing. She crossed her arms. What? I pressed one button. Every security camera around my property turned toward the driveway. I've been recording since you arrived. Her face changed. But she still wasn't scared. Instead, she smiled again. Good. She opened her folder and pulled out another document. Because you're going to want this for court. I took it from her. My name was printed at the top. My address was correct. Even my signature appeared at the bottom. For 3 seconds, I couldn't speak. Then I looked at her. That isn't my signature. She leaned closer and whispered. Maybe you should have read what you signed. I slowly looked back at the paper. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The document wasn't just fake. Someone had copied the signature from an old legal document that had been filed years ago. Someone had gone through my records. Someone had planned this. I folded the paper carefully and handed it back. You've made one mistake. She laughed. Only one. I looked directly into her eyes. You thought I was going to fight you like an ordinary homeowner. Her smile faded. Because she didn't know yet that I had already spent years preparing for people exactly like her. And the next morning, I was going to make one very small change to her property. A change the entire neighborhood would see. You tried to control my home. You should have checked who was watching yours. The next morning, I didn't call the police. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't even call the HOA office. Instead, I drove straight to the county records building with the fake HOA document in my hand. I wanted to know exactly how far this woman had gone. An hour later, I had my answer. My property had never been part of the HOA. Not when I bought it. Not 10 years earlier. Not even when the neighborhood was first built. But there was something else. 6 months earlier, someone had submitted a request to change the official property map. The person who filed it, Marissa Cole, the HOA president. And the request had one strange purpose. It would place my property inside the HOA boundary. I stared at the document. So that's the game, I whispered. She didn't want my house because she hated the color. She wanted my land. My property sat on the only open corner near the main road. And a developer had been trying to buy it for months. If my land became part of the HOA, Marissa could make life miserable until I finally gave up and sold. But she had made one mistake. She had put everything in writing. I took copies of every document and walked out. That afternoon, Marissa came back. This time she brought 4 security guards, a tow truck, and a man wearing a dark suit. She didn't even knock. She walked straight into my driveway and pointed toward my truck. "Tow it." The tow driver looked at me. "Sir." I stepped toward him. "Don't." Marissa shouted, "He has unpaid HOA fines." I held up the county records. "No, I don't." The man in the suit stepped forward. "I'm representing the HOA." I smiled. "Then you should know your HOA doesn't own this property." His face went pale. Marissa quickly interrupted. "Don't listen to him. We have signed documents." I handed the lawyer a copy of the county map. He studied it for several seconds. Then he looked at Marissa. "Where did you get this?" She didn't answer. He looked at me. "Sir, I need to speak with my client." "Sure." As they stepped aside, I heard him whisper, "Marissa, this isn't what you told me." Her face turned red. But she wasn't finished. That evening, she called the police. She told them I had threatened her. 2 officers arrived at my house. Marissa stood behind them with a smug smile. "He's dangerous," she said. "He threatened me and refused to follow HOA orders." One officer asked me what happened. I simply pointed at my cameras. "Everything is recorded." He watched the footage. Then he watched the part where Marissa ordered the guards to enter my property. Then the part where she threatened to tow my truck. Then the part where she admitted the HOA had no permission to be there. The officer looked at her. "Ma'am, you need to leave this property." Her mouth dropped open. "But I'm the HOA president." The officer shook his head. "That doesn't give you police authority." She stared at him. For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. But I still wasn't done. The following morning, I received a letter from the county. The property map change had been rejected. And an investigation had been opened into the documents submitted by Marissa. Then came the bigger shock. The county discovered that my signature wasn't the only one she had copied. 3 other homeowners had fake documents filed against their properties too. Marissa had been doing this for months. She had threatened elderly homeowners. She had placed fake liens on houses. She had sent fake violation notices. And she had pressured several families to sell their homes to companies connected to her brother. Suddenly, the entire neighborhood understood why she had been so desperate to control everyone. It wasn't about keeping the neighborhood beautiful. It was a business. And I had accidentally become the one person standing in the way. 2 weeks later, the HOA held an emergency meeting. Hundreds of homeowners packed into the community hall. Marissa walked in wearing a perfect suit, carrying the same folder she had used against me. She expected people to defend her. Instead, someone shouted, "Where's the money?" Another homeowner stood up. "Why did you put a lien on my house?" Then another. "And why did you send me a letter saying my property was being seized?" Marissa looked around. "I can explain." A voice from the back answered, "No. We want the truth." I stood quietly near the wall. Marissa saw me. "You did this." I shook my head. "No. You did this." Then the county investigator walked through the door. 2 deputies followed him. The room went silent. The investigator placed a stack of documents on the table. "Marissa Cole, you are being investigated for document fraud, false filings, and impersonating legal authority." She immediately pointed at me. "He started all of this." The investigator looked at her. "No. Your own records did." One deputy took the folder from her hands. Marissa tried to pull it back. "That's private." The deputy calmly replied, "Not anymore." She was escorted outside while the entire room watched. Nobody clapped. Nobody celebrated. They simply watched the person who had controlled them for years finally lose her power. A month later, the HOA board was replaced. The fake liens were removed. The property records were corrected. And my home was officially confirmed as private property. Completely outside the HOA. But there was still one thing left. Marissa's house. Her own HOA-approved home had a strict rule about exterior colors. The board had fined people for using the wrong shade of paint. Marissa had personally approved those fines. So when the new board asked me what I wanted to do about the money she had cost me, I told them I didn't want revenge. I wanted something much simpler. I wanted her to follow her own rules. The county approved the cleanup. The new board reviewed the paint records. And according to the same standards Marissa had used against everyone else, her house was in violation. She was ordered to repaint it. The funny part? She had spent years telling homeowners that rules were rules. So I hired a licensed painter. And I painted her house brown. Not some wild color. Not something ugly. Just the exact shade allowed under the HOA's own rulebook. When Marissa saw it, she stood across the street in complete silence. I walked over. She looked at the house. Then at me. "You did this?" I smiled. "No." I pointed at the paperwork in her hand. "Your rules did." She stared at me for a long moment. Then she said something I never expected. "I should have left you alone." I nodded. "That was your first mistake." She looked back at her brown house. "And the second?" I answered. "You thought having a title made you powerful." She didn't say anything. Because by then, everyone knew the truth. Power wasn't the HOA president's title. Power was knowing your rights, keeping the proof, and refusing to let someone bully you into giving them up. A few months later, I stood in my driveway watching my daughter ride her bike across our yard. The fake notice was gone. The security guards were gone. The threats were gone. My home was finally quiet again. I looked at the house and remembered the day Marissa had pointed at my front door and told me I couldn't live there anymore. She had wanted to control my home. She had tried to scare me into leaving. She had forged documents, brought fake authority to my property, and tried to use an HOA to take something that was never hers. In the end, she lost her position, her reputation, and her control. And all I had to do was stand my ground. Because sometimes the strongest answer isn't shouting. It's simply looking at someone who thinks they own you and saying, "This is my home. You don't get to rewrite that."